Then you disapprove of dueling? You would not fight a duel? Asked Albert in his turn, astonished at this strange theory. Oh yes, replied the Count. Understand me. I would fight a duel for a trifle, for an insult, for a blow. And the more so that, thanks to my skill in all bodily exercises, and the indifference to danger I have gradually acquired, I should be almost certain to kill my man. Oh, I would fight for such a cause. But in return for a slow, profound, eternal torture, I would give back the same, were it possible. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as the Orientalists say. Our masters in everything, those favored creatures who have formed for themselves a life of dreams and paradise of realities. But, said Franz to the Count, with this theory which renders you at once judge and executioner of your own cause, it would be difficult to adopt a course that would forever prevent your failing under the power of the law. Hatred is blind, rage carries you away, and he who pours out vengeance runs the risk of tasting a bitter draught. Yes, if he be poor and inexperienced, not if he be rich and skillful. Besides, the worst that could happen to him would be the punishment of which we have already spoken, and which the philanthropic French Revolution has substituted for being torn to pieces by horses or broken on the wheel. What matters this punishment, as long as he is avenged? On my word, I almost regret that in all probability this miserable Peppino will not be beheaded, as you might have had the opportunity of then seeing how short a time the punishment lasts, and whether it is worth even mentioning. But, really, this is a most singular conversation for the Carnival, gentlemen. How did it arise? Ah, I recollect. You asked for a place at my window. You shall have it, but let us first sit down to a table, for here comes the servant to inform us that breakfast is ready. Just as the storm clouds of Dante's mind eclipsed his entire thought process, so too do they clear up, and he resumes his disguise and personality as the affable Count. Continuing a little bit from what he was saying yesterday, he's not outright rejecting the idea of duels, but he's basically saying, if someone starts something, trust me, I'm going to stop it. But he goes on to say, and this last paragraph of Dante speaking here really kind of chilled my bones, because Franz is voicing what I've been voicing over the last couple days, saying that it's gonna corrupt your soul, man. Like, hatred is blind, rage carries you away. He who pours out vengeance runs the risk of tasting a bitter draught. And Dante's response to that is, yeah, if he's poor and doesn't know what he's doing, then yeah, it's gonna take him over. But if he's rich and if he's skillful, then the worst that can happen has already happened to him. Everything's been taken away from him by the crime committed against him. And it's a shame that this Peppino, whoever this guy is, isn't going to actually be beheaded, because you'll see how quick of a execution it is and how little vengeance there actually is in it. I would argue maybe Dante has a point, only so far as it seems futile that any sort of execution is going to hold the healing that you wish. And maybe unlike Dante, I think maybe it's not the way to go, ever, for any situation. But what do I know? I mean, I'm lucky enough to have never been in a situation like that where I wish vengeance and death upon another person. And I'm gonna pull back from the brink of speaking to that further, because that's a dark vein to go down. But after he goes through this, like, you could see the kind of brooding in his eyes almost as he's telling all these points of his theory and philosophy to Albert and Franz. And then finally it just like clears up. He's like, ah, yes, breakfast. Right, yes, we're going to go to the window. We're going to go to the Carnival. How do we get talking about this anyway, folks? Let's go down to the salon and have the breakfast that our servant is going to be providing us in short order. I guess to wrap up, since we're going to breakfast now, just to wrap up this dark talk, couple of bits of research I did on dueling and the guillotine and these sorts of things. It's funny, one thing that struck me is that this story we're reading now is taking place roughly in 1838, I believe we pinpointed it. And yet the Three Musketeers, written to be set in the 1600s, dueling was outlawed. I think it was more because of a nuisance than anything in the story of the Three Musketeers and the time in which it was set. But still, in 19th century Europe, dueling was still accepted, and it was kind of governed by these strict rules of honor, particularly amongst aristocratic people, and it was typically reserved for like personal insults rather than serious crimes, and didn't often result in dying. It wasn't always a duel to the death. It was a duel until the other yields or concedes their point or rescinds their insult to the other person. Sometimes it would go to the death because you can imagine aristocratic people have a reputation to uphold and are probably pretty stubborn when it comes to having to assume the consequences with acknowledging that you've done something wrong by someone else. So, deaths 100% occurred, but we're not the end result 100% of the time. A few more things here. The kind of philosophy of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that goes way back to ancient times. But I found it interesting that it was still a widely accepted philosophy that shaped European discourse of proportional justice, which seems to be really what Dante is getting at here. I want a punishment to the criminal proportional to the crime he committed against me. And there isn't one on the face of the planet that suits that. It's a tricky road to go down because what is proportional? You steal from me, I steal from you, okay? When you start to factor in subjective experience to it, it becomes a bit different. Okay, you steal my valuables, that's one thing. But you steal my valuables that are heirlooms that have been handed down through centuries. You're not just stealing, the street market value of this necklace. You're stealing part of my legacy. My subjective view of that is going to be much higher proportionally than if you were just stealing any old necklace I owned. So the slippery slope of proportional justice seems like a losing battle, which brings me to the guillotine, which the French Revolution, particularly the era called the Terror, which happened just before the real huge rise of Napoleon, standardized that method of execution as a way of being more humane to the earlier, more brutal punishments that existed as forms of execution. Now, that really dives into what you consider to be humane and not humane. I mean, it becomes a kind of an assembly line. Manufactured death, it's just a end product you pop someone into, pull the lever, and there you have it. It makes the executions at least uniform, but proportional justice goes out the window, partly because I think that's a fallacy in and of itself. But one of the things that I think is unspoken here and only briefly alluded to earlier in this chapter was the unbearable torture, and part of the punishment is knowing that you have a death sentence and that someday you will face the guillotine, or you will face, in this case, the mallet, or whatever the method might be. The torment on your soul in that time, that window that elapses between when your execution is announced and when it actually happens, that could tear a person's soul apart as well. Is that proportional? Anyway, I can feel I'm about to get on my high horse, and I don't want to do that. So that's all I'm going to mention, I think, about execution. And hopefully tomorrow we just have some breakfast burritos with Dante and Franz and Albert. Maybe like a little breakfast fajita buffet. That would be nice. Grab your tortillas and some eggs and potatoes and some hot sauce, bring it all together. That's what I'm hoping for. Oh boy, I just made myself hungry. So I'm going to go get something to eat, and I will see you all here tomorrow. Until then, okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.